So, hello everyone. I'm so excited to be joined again today by Dr. Georgia Eid. We did a video previously on kind of creating a guide for formulating the right brain healthy diet for you. But in this video, I'm so excited to be going into if people maybe are not ready to do a ketogenic diet or something like that, or don't want to for whatever reason, digging into what else you can change in your diet to improve your mental health. And so just a reminder, Dr. Georgia Eid is a Harvard-trained, board-certified psychiatrist and nutritional and metabolic psychiatrist. She recently released the book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, which I, again, really recommend checking out to learn more about all of this. And she also has the website diagnosisdiet.com, which is an amazing free resource for people to learn more about all of this. And it has a clinician directory if you want to find a clinician who can help you introduce some of these nutritional interventions in your own life. So thank you so much again, Dr. Eid, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me back, Lauren.
So in our last interview, you shared why it's of benefit to formulate a diet that is ultimately going to promote healthy brain metabolism and what that kind of entails or where you can get started with that. But if someone, for whatever reason is not really wanting to or is just not capable of following a ketogenic diet or paleo or carnivore or one of the ones that you recommended, what are some tips for moving closer toward a brain healthy diet that really anyone could apply to their nutrition or diet?
Yes. So there are a lot of people who are one step at a time people, or who find the idea of completely restructuring their diet from the ground up to be kind of overwhelming to think about. And especially, in my work, of course, I work with people who have mental health challenges, and sometimes it is just a lot to imagine making major changes to their diet. They may feel too depressed, too disorganized, too hopeless about and not really motivated to make a lot of changes at once, and they may need a lot more support to make major changes. So the good news is that any change that you are willing to make is a great place to start. And so wherever you can start there. But make sure that the changes you're making are worth making. So there are some changes that aren't worth making at all. And unfortunately, there are a lot of the things that we think of as important changes to make to a diet to improve health. A lot of those changes are virtually useless. So things, for example, like putting blueberries on top of your oatmeal, or eating more dark chocolate, or making sure you have a glass of red wine with dinner, or making sure you're eating a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, eating more whole grains, avoiding red meat, avoiding saturated fat, or eating a vegan or vegetarian diet. All of those strategies, none of those strategies are worth your time. If you really want to see results and not get discouraged, you want to make sure that the changes you're making are worth making. And so one of the things I've spelled out in the book for people is there's a list of single changes that people can make that are worth making, but I don't just give you that list. In the book, I've explained to you why. Why are these the changes that are most worth making, so that you understand what's behind it, so it doesn't seem like a random suggestion. And so, for example, a brain healthy diet needs to do three things. Whether you eat plant-based, animal-based, or anything in between, no matter what your preferred dietary pattern is, you want to make that diet healthier for the brain. It needs to nourish the brain with all essential nutrients. It needs to protect the brain from damaging ingredients, and it needs to energize the brain safely and protect brain metabolism by keeping glucose and insulin levels in a healthy range. So if you're making any change to your diet, you want to make sure it's helping with one or more of those three goals. And if it's not helping you with one or more of those three goals, it's not worth doing. So to nourish the brain better. So let's say, so a lot of people, for example, have nutrient deficiencies. They're quite common. For example, iron deficiency in women is very common. About 20% of women have iron deficiency. And a lot of, we've been taught, I think a lot of people will be used to hearing, they're used to thinking of iron deficiency as a blood problem. That if you don't have enough iron, then, you might become anemic and you might not be able to carry enough oxygen in your blood. So we think of iron deficiency as a blood problem. But I tell my patients, if you have iron deficiency, you don't just have a blood problem, you have a brain problem. Because the brain needs iron to make energy. The brain needs iron to make neurotransmitters like dopamine. And so the brain is actually more sensitive to iron deficiency than the blood is. So it's really important to address that iron deficiency. So let's say you have iron deficiency. What is a change that you could make to your diet that could improve your iron status? So one thing would be to look at the foundation of your diet. Like, are you eating enough iron-rich foods? The foods that are richest in iron are the animal foods, particularly red meat and shellfish, duck, things like that. Eggs are not a great source of iron, actually. And lighter meats are lower in iron than redder meats, but you don't have to eat mammals. Mammal meat is red. You could eat duck, for example, or, you could eat shellfish. In any case, one change you could make is if you're not eating enough iron-rich foods, you could shore up that part of your diet by making sure you're including some more iron-rich animal foods in your diet. The other piece, and this is something a lot of people aren't aware of, but I explain in the book why this is, you may want to look at the anti-iron foods in your diet. So there are a lot of foods that we're told are good for us, that we're told we're supposed to base our diet on. And these are the grains and the beans and the nuts and the seeds. All of those foods contain powerful anti-iron compounds, just naturally contain them. They're like mineral magnets, and they make it hard for us to absorb minerals from those foods themselves, as well as from foods that we might eat along with those foods, together with those foods. So taking a look at how many grains, beans, nuts, and seeds are in your diet and reducing those or even experimenting with eliminating those. So this is an example of something you could change about your diet that might not be intuitive. Another good example, and this is a very well-known example, is to take out the refined carbohydrates. If you don't want to eat a low carbohydrate diet, which is a great choice for most people, just take out the worst quality carbohydrates, the flours and the sugars and the cereals and the fruit juices, all of the processed carbohydrates, and stick to carbohydrates from fruits and vegetables. That's a change. That way you can still have sweet and starchy foods, but they're much healthier, much more satisfying, much harder to overeat because they've got their natural fibers and they've got lots of water and they're juicy and they're satisfying. Their whole foods are processed by the body in a very different way than factory refined foods. Those are two examples. We can talk about more if you like, but those are a couple of good examples of what things you could do that could make a really big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great place to start. That's kind of where we're at with trying to change our kids' diet, is just starting off with taking out the refined carbohydrates, the stuff that we know is not serving them in any way, shape, or form, physically or brain health-wise. What are some things that maybe, well, I guess you just mentioned some, but what are some other things that may be good to avoid? I was interested in learning about, avoiding types of seed oils or stuff like that, or what else can people kind of go to first off to kind of eliminate or remove from their diet in order to promote better brain health?
Yes. So when people say, what are the most important things to remove? And we're not talking about people who want to, or like you said, are ready to do low carb keto or even paleo or in any case, the 5 things that I would eliminate if I could pick 5 things, they would be the grains, the beans, the legumes. These are the legumes, which are peas, beans, and lentils. So grains, beans, refined carbohydrates, refined seed oils, the so-called vegetable oils, and alcohol.
Right.
Those are the 5 things that I would focus on, and pick any, if you can only change one, pick one of those. And the vegetable oils are really interesting. The science in this is very new. We've only recently started exploring particularly the effect of the so-called vegetable oils on brain health. And I've included all the science that I could find on this topic in the book. But these are oils that are extracted from seeds. These are things like soybean oil, cottonseed oil, safflower, sunflower, canola, grapeseed oil, all of the corn oil, all of the oils that we're told are heart healthy because they contain no cholesterol, because they don't come from animals. They're plant-based. They come from plants. They contain no cholesterol. They contain no saturated fat. So we're told that these are some of the healthiest choices we can make when it comes to added fats in our diet. Nothing could be further from the truth. These are extraordinarily refined factory product. You cannot wrangle oil out of these seeds without 15 chemical steps that include high heat and explosive solvents and lots of very high-tech equipment. An oil refinery to say remove oil from sunflower seeds looks exactly like an oil refinery that you'd see, that's used to extract oil from in the petrochemical industry. There, you can't tell the difference when you look at the outside of the plant. There's nothing natural about these oils. The problem with these oils, these oils do exist in nature, but they exist in the context of a whole food and in very small percentages. So they're, if you look, for example, at a sunflower seed, that's got a lot of protein and a lot of fiber and some other compounds in it. And it does have a small amount of oil, but a small percentage of that seed is that oil. We are designed to be able to, process and handle and consume a small amount of these oils, but not to extract them in factories and pour them over everything we're eating and cook with them. They're in mayonnaise, they're in salad dressings, they're in stir fries, they're in every prepared and processed food. They're in all of the baked goods that are trying to use butter, trying to avoid using butter and lard and other animal fats. All of that has been replaced with usually canola oil as a substitute. Now, the problem with these oils is that they are most of them very high, unnaturally high in a very, very fragile omega-6 fatty acid called linoleic acid. And again, we're only designed to see a small percentage of linoleic acid in our diets. Linoleic acid crosses the blood-brain barrier, and when it gets to the other side, what's very interesting is that the early studies are showing that the brain doesn't seem to really know what to do with most of that linoleic acid. It's not accustomed to seeing high amounts coming through. And so what it does with most of it is it burns it for energy. And this is not good. The brain is not supposed to be burning long fatty acids for energy. Omega-6 molecules are very long fatty acids. They have to be chopped up into tiny pieces before they can be used for energy. That process creates a lot more something called oxidative stress in the brain. The longer the molecule is, the more oxidative stress you have as you have to chop it into more pieces. The brain functions best when it's burning small molecules. Glucose and ketones are small molecules, and so they burn a lot more cleanly than long fatty acids do. So brain's not supposed to be burning fatty acids for energy. And the brain has very limited capacity to mop up oxidative stress compared to other organs. And oxidative stress is one of the root causes, one of the main underlying driving forces of mental health conditions and of psychiatric and neurological conditions. So we're often told, well, to protect our brain from oxidative stress, we're supposed to be eating more antioxidants. But that actually doesn't work. Our brain has its own antioxidant system. It's just that we're overwhelming it with the wrong foods. And so we can't mop it all up. And so what we need to do is, instead of trying to eat more antioxidants, which doesn't work, We need to eat fewer of the foods that are causing the oxidative stress in the first place and let our own antioxidant system so that we won't overwhelm our own natural internal antioxidants.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clarifying why that's a problem in the brain. And also, it was good that you noted that, we've been told these kinds of oils or whatever are heart healthy or whatnot. And there is just so much conflicting information circulating around and being promoted around, health and wellness and what a healthy diet is or entails. I myself have had quite a difficult time kind of wading through it all. And I've heard from many others as well that they just don't know, what to trust or what is true in terms of actually following a healthy diet. And so do you have any advice for how to kind of sort through all of this information and to figure out what is true or what is ultimately going to help you the most?
Yes. So one of the chapters in the book helps people understand where information about nutrition science comes from, and shows people the quality of that information and how they can easily figure out whether a study that has been published or some new headline or some new paper has come out, they can easily figure out whether that's worth paying any attention to or not. So that chapter explains that most of the headlines that we see are generated from this type of a study called a nutrition epidemiology study, which is just a fancy way of saying that it's questionnaire-based guesswork about relationships between foods and diseases. The best it can do, even the highest quality nutrition epidemiology study, the best it can do is generate a guess about what's going on that then needs to be tested in clinical trials. But the problem is that these guesses, most of which are biologically nonsensical, most of these theories, these untested guesses, they lead people down the wrong path. And so what's happening there is that they get printed, they get published before the theories are ever put to the test in a clinical trial. And so people kind of eat these headlines up. They think that they've already come to a conclusion that it's already been demonstrated, it's already been shown, it's already been proven, it's already been tested that this is a reality, this is a fact, when that's not the case. But it's not their fault. It's not people's fault that they interpret it that way. That's the way the headlines are written in this way, and the articles are written in this way that make it sound as though these are established facts, when instead they're just very weak, untested guesses about what's actually going on. And most of these guesses are very off base when it comes to human biology, the biology of the body, the biology of the brain, and the biology of food. So and you can easily tell the headlines will use words like linked with, associated with, connected to, risk of. So, eating a half cup of blueberries more per week will decrease your risk of dementia. Or, eating 2 squares of dark chocolate per day will reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. Or red meat linked with early death, linked with, associated with, those words, those are red flags telling you that's a nutrition epidemiology study, and therefore there's no reason to pay any attention to those studies. The problem is that's most of the studies that get published.
I mean, why is that okay? Why is that the state of nutritional science?
Lauren, if you know someone that you can write to convince them that the thing that really upsets me the most about this is that reputable journals who have editors, scientists, researchers on their editorial boards who should know better, who should know that these studies are not worth publishing and they should not approve them, they should not publish them. I don't know why they continue to publish these extremely weak, untested theories as if they are findings. These are not findings. And so when people are looking at nutrition epidemiology studies, what they need to understand is nobody has measured or recorded what people are actually eating. Researchers are asking people to estimate. A typical question would be from a questionnaire, how many half-cup servings of blueberries have you eaten on average over the past year? Over the past year. And you can't say, I don't know, or I don't remember, or you've got to be kidding me. You have to choose, you're forced to choose a quantity. 1/2 cup per week, 3 half cups per week, 1/2 cup every day. You must quantify it. Very few people will be able to answer that question accurately. And those answers become the data, which it's not data. These are wild guesses. And furthermore, they don't ask you about every food you've eaten. They ask you just about certain ones, as if all the rest of the things you ate don't matter. There's a completely unscientific method. So if we want to really, nutrition is not rocket science. It's these studies that are always confusing us, and the headlines are always flip-flopping. One day eggs are good for you, the next day they're bad for you. Those headlines are generated from these studies. But nutrition science is very simple. If you take away all those studies and you just look at the biology of food, the biology of the brain, the biology of how we process food, what cells need, and we know the answers to all of those questions, and I walk people through that so they can see how easy it is, it becomes very obvious and completely uncontroversial what we should eat to be healthy. But that's not the information that makes it into the headlines.
Right. I think that's really important to let people know they need to be aware of when digesting all of this conflicting evidence we have, or not evidence, information. So a lot of the changes I've made over the last 8 months of this metabolic health project have been, kind of really big lifestyle changes. And I think that can feel really daunting and sometimes even feel impossible for a lot of people thinking about doing the same for themselves. And so I guess I'm wondering, what is your advice? How can we help people make these really big changes? Or maybe even what is the best way to just get started?
So it can really feel overwhelming. And when you think about, because I followed your story to the extent that I've had the time to do so, and I've watched a number of your videos, and I've seen the extraordinary lifestyle changes you've made, and really admire what you have done to turn things around for yourself. And it's clearly a lot of work, but as you can, as is also very obvious from the interest in your work, is that look at the tremendous potential benefits that you can reap from making these changes. And I really think, any journey begins with a single step, right? So start wherever you can. And then if that change helps you, but it doesn't help you enough, and when you're ready to make the next change, make that next change, one step at a time. But do something, because if you don't change anything, nothing's going to change. So what helps people is being really clear about your goals, what you're trying to accomplish, being clear about what you feel you can change right now, and working on that. So let's say, I have a wonderful colleague, Dr. Jen Unwin. She's a psychologist based in the UK. She specializes in helping people with dietary changes. Her husband, Dr. David Unwin, is a general practitioner in the UK who helps people treat diabetes and reverse obesity and reduce the risk for heart disease and reduce fatty liver and all kinds of metabolic problems using low carbohydrate diets. And she, as the psychologist, has helped him figure out how he can help motivate and support and encourage people to make small changes, one change at a time in his practice when he's only got 10 minutes per patient. Because he said, how can I help people? I've got 10 minutes. I don't have time to do dietary counseling or motivate people or educate people about dietary changes. And she said, oh, yes, you do. And I'm going to show you how. And so one of her key takeaways is you decide for yourself, is there one change you feel ready to make between now and, say, 2 weeks from now? And whatever that is, whether it's switching from sugary sodas to seltzer, or, eating burgers without the bun, whatever it is, start there and keep going. And even if you haven't done it perfectly, which you won't, whatever change you did accomplish, let's say that you were trying to change from say sugary soda to seltzer. Let's say that you were successful with that 5 out of 7 days that first week. Don't focus on the 2 days you didn't make the change. Focus on the 5 that you did. Focus on the victories, because these are not easy changes. Be patient with yourself, be positive, and, encourage yourself. Get support. Team up with somebody else, a friend, a family member. Ask people in your family if they would be willing to support you by tucking away the foods that you find more tempting or not eating them in your presence. Declaring your goals to people you trust is really helpful, because that helps keep you accountable. Journaling for yourself is a really, really important. Either you can do it with your voice or with it on paper. A lot of this advice is in the book. So start wherever you can, and then as you're making these changes, if you're not noticing benefits, you may need to go a little deeper, and you may need to have professional dietary counseling or a coach. A coach is great. Nicole is fantastic. If you're trying to do keto, but if, let's say you're not ready to do keto, or maybe keto isn't what's right for you, these other dietary changes, there are lots of people, professionals and peer support counselors that you could turn to, websites, inspirational videos, watch Lauren's channel, find people whose stories resonate with you. I've got lots of patients who I'll say, okay, well, I obviously can't talk to you every day. I can meet with you every couple of weeks or so. Let's find some people that you really like on YouTube or podcasts or books or however you like to learn best. And just 5 minutes every morning, take a little dose of inspiration from somebody else so that you don't feel alone in the process. I mean, really, you don't want to do this by yourself. We're social creatures. So if you try to do something by yourself, it's just so much harder. So try to get your doctor on board, or your therapist, or your family member, or a partner, or friend, a coworker. Try to buddy up with somebody else who can do this with you. You can encourage each other, support each other, learn from each other, and then document your progress. And one thing I find really empowering, even if you're not going to do keto, because it doesn't matter, it's really helpful even if you're not going to do keto, is a continuous glucose monitor. If you can get your hands on a continuous glucose monitor, even 1 or 2 of them, because they can be expensive out of pocket. They can be about $75 per patch out of pocket, but it gives you 2 weeks of amazing round-the-clock data about how your food choices are affecting your glucose levels in real time, so that even if you're not going keto, you can get your blood sugar into a normal range, even if you're not going into ketosis, and you can figure out, hey, that whole wheat bread in the morning that I thought was so good for me might not be the best choice. Because look, my blood sugar went up by 50 points. That's alarming. So maybe I'll set that aside, or maybe I'll cut that piece of bread in half. So do your own metabolic experiments, and discover your own personal carbohydrate tolerance. I teach people how to do that in the book. There's so many things you can do if you get curious. There are lots of places you can start.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. I think that was all really tangible advice for people who may be feeling overwhelmed or, not sure where to start. I think that was a really good and helpful kind of guidance or advice about how to do that. So thank you so, so much, Dr. Eid. Again, for anyone watching, I would really recommend you check out her book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. It is full of even more helpful information, and it is such a good resource. Also, check out her website, diagnosisdiet.com, for far more free resources and the clinician guide if you want to get connected with a clinician who can help you with the nutritional aspect of your mental health care. So thank you so, so much, Dr. Eid, for joining us today. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me, Lauren, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk with your viewers.